What we're going to do between now and lunch is a bit more of an explanation of putting mindfulness in context. And then we'll do some meditation just before lunch. If we get time, I'd like to do some walking meditation and sitting meditation. Maybe mindfulness and breath. Okay? So we've got, we'll probably have lunch in about an hour and a quarter, something like that. So mindfulness is experiential. As we talked about before morning tea, mindfulness is experiential. It helps, however, to have a theoretical view or an understanding of what we're doing when we practice this. When we have an understanding of how something works, it gives us the ability to be flexible, both in our own situations, like being mindful in all different situations, as well as being flexible with the people we're working with. And it also, the theory behind what we're doing gives us a context and provides meaning for experience. So it's good to get an overview about this. You can understand what I mean by being flexible. It's like when you know what you're doing, you can apply that to a whole variety of situations. You don't feel stuck because the situation isn't conducive to being perfectly mindful. So it's more like you adapt to the situation rather than the situation having to adapt to you. And also, I often see this, I often hear from people that I supervise how they're having troubles with particular presentations, like clinical presentations. When you understand how this works, you can adapt to those clinical presentations so that it's meaningful for that particular individual or that group of individuals. So the way I understand this, the overview of this comes from an understanding of what we call four realities or four truths. And these truths are actually two cause-effect relationships. I've got here, there is difficulty. We could say there is stress. That's the truth for many of us. Well, that's why you're here. That's the truth. There is the experience of stress. And another truth is that the difficulties in life, in this case stress, have causes. That's true, isn't it? So here's a cause-effect relationship. There is stress and there's a cause for stress. The other truth, the third truth is that it is possible to find freedom from stress. You have faith in that, to be honest. That's why you're here. If you didn't have faith in that, you wouldn't be here. Or as long as you made freedom from stress your aspiration, then that would make sense for you. You don't know that it's possible to be free from stress. Maybe you've experienced freedom from stress before, or you've seen people who are free from stress. So you have some sort of confidence in that. And the fourth truth, the fourth reality, is that there is a way to find freedom. There is a way to be free. There is a way to manage stress. If you want to put these two cause-effect relationships into a different model, you could put it into a medical model perspective. And here you could say that there are disorders, or there is illness, and that illness has an etiology. There's causative factors. And it is possible to be healthy. It is possible to find balance and harmony. And that there are treatments and there are healing pathways that you can follow. So, that's another a way of understanding these two cause-effect relationships. If you're coming from a psychologist's perspective, a common psychologist perspective is cognitive behavioural therapy, or CBT, you could say that there are presenting problems or disorders. That's true. There is anxiety, depression, obsessive compulsive disorder, stress-related disorders, and so on. There are all these disorders. There's a whole there's a book called the DSM-5 that you're probably very familiar with. You know, there's lots of disorders there. There are presenting problems. And two, there are causative factors for how and why the problems may have developed, and also maintenance factors for keeping the problem keeping the problem happening. Like, for example, there are causative factors for why an anxiety disorder may have arisen, like a post-traumatic stress. I mean, that's actually not called an anxiety disorder now. It's called a stress-related disorder in the DSM-5. But there are, you know, there was an original trauma, for example. But also you see it's how people respond to the symptoms or respond to the effects of that trauma that keep it maintained. They maintain their illness by the way they relate to the experience. Now, I'm not saying it's their fault. No such thing as fault here. But I'm just saying that various illnesses, various psychological presentations are often maintained by the way we relate to them. So we have here that there are disorders, there are causative factors for how and why they developed, and also maintenance factors for keeping them keeping them presenting. But it is also possible to be free from the problem, or at least reduce the severity of the issues. And that's true. I know that's the truth in my professional lives because I see people. I can see the causative factors, I can see what influenced them, and then we also see them, or we treat them, or we help them because we know that it is possible to be free. Otherwise, why bother doing what we do as therapists? And the fourth truth is that there are treatments that use the therapeutic relationship and cognitive behavioural and affective strategies to address the causative factors and the maintaining processes. Maintaining processes, yeah. So there are lots of strategies that we can use. So we've got this understanding of two cause-effect relationships: suffering and its causes, or stress and its causes, freedom from stress and its causes. And I want to bring your attention to a saying that you find in ACT, a saying that's in acceptance and commitment therapy. It's really a good, really cool saying. It goes like this, and you can read it, but I'm going to read it out anyway. If I continue to do what I've always done, then I'm going to get what I've always got. Does that make sense? If you continue to feed your stress by, having the things happening to you or whatever's happening, by feeding into that, then you're going to continue to experience the stress. But if you do something different, you're likely to be able to resolve the stress. And you can see this is the four realities, or the four truths, are an example of this. There's another saying, and this saying comes from, this saying is found in the text, the suttas, the traditional text of the Buddhist teachings. And it's an illustration of, it's a demonstration of something called dependent arising, or dependent co-arising, or dependent arising. So, and dependent arising is the way, well, I'll talk straight about the Buddha, the way the Buddha understood how things arise and how they change, the nature of things. And it's quite complex, but it is simply said in this way sometimes. When this is, that is. Because this arises, that arises. When this is not, that is not. Because this ceases, that ceases. So if you go back to it might sound a bit strange, but if you go back to that previous little saying, when you're doing this, then that will happen. When you're feeding into something, something will happen. Like if you're creating a cause, then the result will happen. But if you're not creating the cause, then it won't happen. Does that make sense? It sounds pretty simple, doesn't it? but it's quite profound. So if I come to the fourth truth, pathways or ways to be free, or ways to be free from stress, or ways to heal issues, then this is the way I understand it, and this also becomes the context of meditation. And what we have here is 8 factors, and within 3 components. The components are wisdom as one component. Another component is lifestyle and ethics, or wise behaviours. And another component is called cultivation. I'll just see if I've got... Oh yeah. No, I haven't got it. Cultivation. I'll put the word cultivation there because, coming back to Pali again, and I mostly learned how to meditate. I learnt the basics of meditation in Thailand. I went to Thailand and became a monk when I was 20. I ordained when I was 21. But I went to Thailand when I was still 20, I think. Around about that age anyway. And with the intention to become a monk, and I ordained as a monk, and I lived as a monk for about 2 years in the forest traditions of northeast Thailand. And there wasn't any English speakers there, so I learned to speak Thai. But as you learn that, as you're learning that language, and also within the milieu of being around meditative people, you learn a lot about Pali as well. Not that I studied Pali, but it's just part of the thing. It's part of the process. You can't help but learn Pali. And a lot of Thai words are from Pali derivatives. Just like Latin, in English we find a lot of words coming from Latin. In Thai you find a lot of words coming from Pali. So when you talk about meditation in Thai, what it's called sometimes is called bhavana, which is a Pali word, bhavana. Bhavana, B-H-A-V-A-N-A, bhavana. It means to bring into being, to cultivate. So I'm talking about meditation here when we talk about mindfulness and concentration as 3 factors on this context of meditation. So if I can talk about this little process a bit, and then it'll give meaning to why we do what we do with mindfulness. It doesn't sort of really start anyway. You can see how there's arrows going backwards and forwards between these components. And the wisdom component involves understanding or view or perspective and intentions or aspirations or good desires, I suppose. Now, we can apply this to anything really. If, for example, you started to understand how you're causing yourself stress, a lot of stress happens to us. That's for sure. That's for certain. Like a lot of things come from the outside to cause us stress, but we feed into it by the way we relate to it. There's no denial about that, is there? And all we can do is work with how we can feed into it, and we can then change the external environment by being clearer within ourselves. So it's not impossible to change the external environment, but it's most beneficial to change your internal environment. So when you start to understand something about yourself, when you start to understand that you're feeding into issues and problems, or you're doing what you've always done, then you have the ability, or you have the space to make a choice. That's another word I could have used for intentions, choice. You have the ability and you make a decision to act in a particular way. That decision is like an intention. You can intend to continue to do what you've done, or you can intend to do something different. So if you intend to do something different, then that is followed through with actions. It's all very well to understand something and have the intention, but if you don't follow through with your intentions, nothing's going to happen, nothing's going to change. So what we have here with the wisdom component is you understand something, you have a good intention, and then you follow it through with the way you live, the way you respond with your speech, the way you act with your speech, what you do with your speech, what you do with your actions, and what you do with in your livelihood, the way you live your life, the way you make a living. So obviously, if you have a good understanding that something's not working quite well, you'll intend to do something better or differently. Then, so your speech, action and livelihood will be actions that are in line with your understanding and your best intentions. That make sense? Is that clear? So then, what happens then is that we have a kind of a stability or a mental composure to be able to cultivate our mind, which is what meditation is. And the tools of cultivation, or the aspects of cultivation, are energy or effort, mindfulness and concentration. Concentration here is not, I don't want to kind of convey this sense that we might have got at school where you got the finger wagged at you and said, concentrate. It's not like a forced activity. Actually, I'll tell you the word for concentration. In Pali, it's samadhi. And it's interesting, when you break up that word up, it means to come, to bring together and to place. It's like a gathering of something. What you do with concentration, or samadhi, is gathering your attention and putting it somewhere. And it is actually very relaxing. It's not a struggle. If you struggle with concentration, you're likely not to be able to concentrate. So if you actually obeyed what your teachers might have been saying to you when they were saying, concentrate, otherwise blah, 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 that you may have likely not been able to concentrate because you're struggling with it. But concentration is this being able to put your attention somewhere. Mindfulness is, of course, remembering to be attentive. You're paying attention to experience, and in this case, we're paying attention to experience with a kind of curiosity, with a kind of an investigation about what's going on here. So we learn from it. And the energy is the balance of effort. And there's some traditional analogies that are used for this. One analogy is like if you're tuning a guitar. And you know how you tune a guitar? Sometimes it's a bit loose. You play guitar, don't you? Helen, yep. Sometimes it's a bit loose, sometimes it's a bit tight. You sort of got to balance it. If it's too tight or loose, it doesn't sound right. But if you balance it, it's kind of right. So effort here is the balance between kind of doing nothing, sort of laying back and falling to sleep, and also struggling and straining. So it's the right balanced effort. It's the right balanced energy. So when we're able to bring attention to something and investigate into how this works, what happens is we start to develop understanding about it. A simple example I used to use when I was working with asylum seekers, and many of you know that I worked on Christmas Island for 16 months, and I used to teach mindfulness to many asylum seekers. I used to teach both in the SAMS units, the single adult men's units, the unaccompanied minors units, and also in the family units. Now, with the SAMS, I used to make an example of something like driving along in your car, in your vehicle, and the vehicle breaks down. What do? Do you just kick it and swear at it, or do you go out the front of the car, open up the bonnet, and have a look inside, see what's going on? Yeah, probably both. But anyway, so here they are driving along, car breaks down, they decide they want to investigate what's going on. So they open up the bonnet and they look under the bonnet, and they can't immediately see anything. But they have to concentrate. They can't be distracted by, things that are happening around them, because they're not going to find anything if they're just kind of looking around at everything that's going around them. So they have to concentrate. And also they have to apply some investigation. So they look under, they screw, unbolt a few things and look under a few things, and they see, I see the carburetor pipe or the fuel pipe is broken loose, so it's not working. So they fix it. This is the same as meditation in some respects. Not quite. It's like you need concentration to be able to see clearly. Otherwise, you're not going to see beyond the surface of what's going on. You need to be able to concentrate. And also, you need to bring a kind of a curiosity and investigation to the situation. Otherwise, you're not going to understand it. And once you understand it, you're able to act in a way that rectifies the problem. So here we have this kind of path. We're paying attention to ourselves, our lives. We're investigating, we're looking deeply. Sometimes it's not easy to do this, by the way. It's quite difficult. One of the words, actually the word for effort in Pali is virya. V-I-R-I comes from the same root of the word courage, the same word for courage. It actually takes a lot of courage sometimes to look at ourselves. I'm sure you agree, yeah? Because it's not always easy, it's not always pleasant. So when we exercise courageous energy and pay attention with curiosity, focused attention on what's happening, we start to understand ourselves. When we understand ourselves, we can, and the issues in our lives, we can make good intentions that will work to lead to freedom from those issues, and therefore we act in ways that are wise with our speech, our actions, and our living. Does that make sense? There you got it. There's the practical aspect of it. So mindfulness here is just one aspect of this. And when you cultivate it at a meditative level, you're practicing it intensely. You're putting conscious effort into it. That's how it works. So we can go home now. No.